Up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one courage, not a blade of grass. This land is all I know. We gonna make it somehow. We will bend like a bow and never break. Our fathers came here, and they lived and died here, and we ain't moving nowhere, big mistake. Cause we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one rice, not a bit of grass. This land is all I know. We gonna make it somehow. We will bend like a bow and never break. We gonna make it somehow. We will bend like a bow and never break.
Well, I think we got two sets of videos here. All right. Hey, good night, JB. How you doing? All right. We had quite a break over the last few weeks.
Good night, Salim. I'm doing quite well.
Great. I think you got your video on.
Sorry?
Quite a break over the last few. Hold on 1 second there.
I'm doing quite well.
I think one of us got our video on.
I think you got your video on. Sorry? I think we're getting a feedback somewhere. It's not on my end.
Yeah. Let me clean it up here.
I think we're getting a.
I think we cleared out, right? Yeah. So JB, this was we took quite a break from each other, but I guess we're back together, and there's so much that happened over the last month or so. Lots of change. Hold 1 second there. I'll be right back.
Just pull it in.
Hey, sorry about that. When you do these shows live at home, all kind of thing happens, right? You get the doorbell that ring and you got to go answer it. You get kids running around, and hopefully we'll see you one day changing your daughter's diaper.
I know.
Live on this program here. But quite a lot has changed, One of the big things that happened during the last month, of course, was the Agri-Investment Conference that was held earlier this month, right? And I think late last month, sorry. And it kind of puts Guyana in a different light. I think Guyana is really taking leadership in so many areas, and rightfully so. We've got the people, we've got the land, we've got the resources, and I think with the support of some of the regional leaders, and of course our wide diaspora, there's so much that Guyana can do in Guyana and for the region. I mean, only recently our president was in Los Angeles, right? At the Summit of the Americas, and you could see even at that level, President Irfan was the
star of the show.
Yeah, he was like the star of the show. He was showing
he's like a celebrity president.
Yeah, as one guy said, I can't remember who it was, but he's a rock star. He shows up at the regional conferences and he's a rock star. He shows up at the global events and he's a rock star. And this is good. This is all good for Guyana. And
Yeah, and he he's a rock star not because well, I say he's a celebrity president. Another
Mhm.
guy said, I think it was the CEO of Gwinfest, said he's a rock star,
That's right.
but
That's right, Peter.
not in particular for his good looks or anything of that sort. I don't want to take away his looks from him, but for the kind of deliverables, the speeches, the powerful and impactful speeches that he deliver.
Mhm.
And at home here, when the president represents Guyana on the global stage, I feel very proud as a Guyanese,
Oh yes, yes,
um,
yes, yes.
to have that kind of leadership and delivering those impactful and powerful
Yeah,
and passionate speeches.
passionate. I think.
And they are not just speeches because home here, being here, I can confirm that those speeches are backed up with action. There is
Yep.
a plan, there's a plan to move forward, there's a plan to achieve those goals and so on. And tonight we're actually going to talk about one of them. And but
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
allow you first to
Mhm.
share your experience from having participated in the recently concluded agro expo.
Yeah. Well, I think it was, again, that was a brilliant, brilliant demonstration of Guyana's ability to be the leader of the region. There's no doubt that apart from it being in Guyana itself, I think what was discussed and what was explored demonstrates that we can play a major role in moving the Caribbean forward. The theme of the Agri Investment Conference an expo was the to reduce imports, food imports into the Caribbean by 25% by the year 2025. And I think we import about $7-8 billion, and so you're looking up anywhere from 1.5 to 2 billion food being produced in the Caribbean. And of course, like all of our viewers know, that conference was attended by the top leaders in the Caribbean. Of course, you had Guyana's leadership, and that's another thing I like about President Irfan and the way he's managing the government. That everybody's on deck, everybody's is playing a role. So you could see at the conference all the ministers actively involved in bringing whatever resources that they may have to the agri sector, and to boost Guyana's image and boost Guyana's argument, to move in a direction of less food import. So and of course I was there. I spent all the 3 days there. It was an incredibly well organized event. It was primarily attended by an international audience of Americans, a lot of Caribbean nationals, a lot of Caribbean government officials, apart from the head of state. And there was persons from Brazil, just about everywhere. Everyone was in Guyana to kind of discuss how do we move production of food forward in the Caribbean. I was there, of course, because to address a very important issue. I was there as a panelist. I presented on a platform called Guyana Investors. Guyana Investors, of course, is a platform that allows investors to access capital. One of the biggest issue in Guyana is yes, we've got investors, we've got great ideas, we've got projects, but has always been and capital has always been dodging us. So there were three main areas that was discussed at the conference. The main one was, of course, better, more effective trade agreements between the nations of the Caribbean, and the commitment for us to move in a better direction, to have better trade agreements and better policies between nations so we can do easier trade. Dominica, the president of Dominica, he mentioned he said clearly it's easier for him to export ginger to France than it is to export it to Guyana. You know, so for him that's a big issue. You know, and the case can be said about so many other products in the Caribbean. So that was a main, and I think that's probably the foundational issue. The second one was, of course, finance. The vice president in his presentation mentioned that this will require about $15 billion worth of investment in the Caribbean and, of course, in Guyana too, right? That reducing it by 25% will require $15 billion of investments. There was a very extensive panel on finance. How do we finance this entire expansion of the agri sector? I was part of the panel, and that's a key area. And again, everyone has to come to the table with different resources, different skill sets, and there is definitely that's one of the big challenges. The third challenge, of course, is the distribution of our goods and our produce in the Caribbean. The lack of you probably heard that Guyana and Trinidad signed an agreement for a ship to ply the Caribbean. And there's other things, whether it's more efficient aircraft, more frequent aircraft, more shipping, better distribution, because we're divided by waters, right? So distribution or communication, finance, and trade agreements were the three things that just about every speaker spoke about and highlighted as areas that we have to overcome. And I think, by and large, I think the Guyanese government, and this is one thing I noticed clearly when I was at the conference, was President Irfan Ali was not sitting and listening. In fact, when everyone else was talking and giving their speech, or some were even nodding away, President Irfan was busy networking, meeting with the president of Dominica, meeting with the Prime Minister of Trinidad, with Mia Motley. He was doing things while we were all listening. He was busy trying to say, hey, that was something that was said in the right way. Let's do something right now. So I think there'll be a lot coming out of this. I saw for sure that there was a larger participation by Guyanese producers at Agri conference. So all in all, I think it was a great conference. It placed Guyana in a leadership position at the head of the table, and I think the Caribbean are beginning to see that Guyana is making that significant turn, and this is all because of a simple change in political leadership can create so much more confidence and benefits for the people in the region. So there's no doubt that the words and the action of the current administration under President Irfan Ali, is resounding and resonating and rebounding throughout the Caribbean, and they understand that we're not a country that's going to talk. I think we're beginning to walk the walk, so to speak. So I mean, that's my initial thoughts on it. Like I said, I believe a lot was said. There was a lot of promises. And I know the president, even after the conference, you could see things are happening on the ground in Guyana. Even before the conference, I think President Irfan Ali was busy kind of lining up certain agricultural initiative. I think in all of his speech, even at the oil conference, even when he's addressing international bodies in Guyana or outside of Guyana, he keeps mentioning, yes, we've got oil, we've got the fossil fuel, and we've got all that stuff. But yes, agriculture will remain our backbone of the economy. And you could see that this conference sort of put all of that energy and thought into it. So definitely there was action behind that commitment or that philosophy that agriculture is will keep us going, will require us doing things differently. And more importantly, we live in a world today where you see, because of oil prices, because of wars and other challenges, and the Caribbean will be forced to find new ways of generating its own food sources. If we don't start now, we could go hungry tomorrow. And these are some salient points. Another important point that was raised, along cultural and health aspect of local production, was, we've got 13 million tourists in the Caribbean every year, and they're being exposed to American food when they come here, to the Caribbean. So local production will require an exposure of local cuisine, by all the islands and all the countries in the Caribbean, and that's the real essence, and that's the real experience of a tourist coming to the Caribbean. In addition to that, from a health perspective, also, a lot of the foods that we're importing into the Caribbean, whether it's from Europe or North America or elsewhere, it's causing diabetes and it's causing hypertension for the population across the Caribbean. Sicknesses and some of the diseases that were never seen. That's because we are importing and we're consuming, and it hurts us at the health level. So those are some of the points that I was very happy to be there, and I must say, as a Guyanese, going to a conference that's well organized and that's saying the right thing, it was a proud moment, I think, for myself and everyone who was there.
Abs- Absolutely, Salim. I mean, you made some important points, and your assessment of that forum, which I believe was a resounding success. The work now begins.
Yeah.
Your assessment is absolutely correct. Back in 2020, um, sometime around September, I would have written an academic paper for a conference where the topic of that paper I wrote about the geopolitical importance of Guyana against the backdrop of its our newfound oil resources and the massive amount of oil reserves, now
Mhm.
in excess of um, 10 billion barrels of oil, which is discovered. And there is an estimate of of about 20, in excess of 20 billion, which is not yet
Yeah.
discovered. And as you know, exploration is still ongoing. So that is massive. And that in itself is the backdrop in which I presented the case that you know the political leadership of Guyana need to take all of that into context, take all of that into consideration, recognize the leverage that we have as a country in terms of influence and power on a geopolitical level, and seek to position Guyana to lead,
Mhm.
to chart these regional agenda. For many years, countries, CARICOM, when CARICOM was formed, it was actually supposed to mirror the Eurozone, for example, where the European Union, sorry,
Hmm.
where there is a, when we speak of regional integration, in theory, regional integration means there is a common currency, as in the case of the European Union. Countries seek to coordinate and harmonize their monetary and fiscal policies. Um, to do that, you have the European Central Bank. So each individual country has their individual central bank, which in turn has to coordinate with
Hmm.
the central bank for the union or the region. That's how you could administer, maintain a common monetary policy goal for the region, a common passport, and these sort of stuff, right? Apart from free movement of goods and people and services and so on. Now, that is in theory, well, it exists in the European Union, and in theory, that is how CARICOM is supposed to function,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Replicate those features, those aspects. Unfortunately, over the years, CARICOM has barely managed to get a common passport, right? We ain't reached to the currency yet. We're far away from getting there. First of all, in order for you to harmonize and coordinate monetary policy across the region, you got to have a regional uh, central bank,
Yeah.
right? We don't have that, so we're far away from that. Now, why I'm saying this, I am happy to see that almost everything that I wrote in that paper in terms of how the political leadership should position Guyana, to leverage our geopolitical importance and to lead a number of regional agenda, including what we're talking about tonight, which we have stemming from the Agro Forum
Hmm.
and the action points that came out of that on regional food security. I'm happy to see that these things are taking shape and are manifesting. One other thing that I made mention of, I wrote in that paper, is when we speak of regional integration from the perspective of Guyana, we have to look at it beyond just CARICOM, because Guyana is not just part of CARICOM. We are part of
Interesting. Yeah.
the South American continent. And one of the reasons why Brazil is so keen to build that road connecting Guyana and Brazil is so that they could move their goods through Guyana to access other international markets. Now, the feasibility of that road goes hand in hand with the deepwater port, for example. So,
Yep.
when you look at all of those projects, I mean, you don't need to be a scientist to know, or a geologist, or any kind of specialist. Common sense. Look at the map. Look
Yeah.
at the world
Exactly.
map. Look at South America. Look at where Guyana is geographically.
Look where
Look at
Panama
where
is.
Brazil is in South America, and look at where traditionally, Brazil has to move ship their goods from literally around the continent.
Yeah.
So it is a longer journey, and a longer journey means it's a higher cost. Okay, so there is time and money,
Hmm.
versus if you could cut that journey, right? Cut that time if it takes 30 days or if it takes 40 days. And if you could build the road, build a deep water port, and move those goods through Guyana instead, you save 20 days in shipping time,
Yeah.
right? You also saving money for the country, right? So when we speak of regional integration, right? And this regional agenda, it has to go beyond just CARICOM. It has to be, we have to take into consideration the South American component.
And I,
And
and I was gonna say that
interestingly,
you go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm happy that you mentioned, I didn't know there was a panel. I didn't attend the physical conference. I just looked at the presentations by the respective heads of state. Um, but I'm happy to know that there was actually a finance panel. And
Hmm.
interestingly, in that same paper I wrote, which was published in different parts of the local media, at different point in time, I made the proposal that if we're going to achieve these agenda, we got to think of a development bank, not for Guyana, but we have to think of a South American development bank. Because for me, Guyana is in a unique strategic position which we need to seize to advance the CARICOM agenda as well as to advance an integration agenda of South America. Integrate South America with the rest of the region, with the rest of Latin America and CARICOM,
Hmm.
with the rest of the world,
Yeah.
right? And how do you integrate? You could integrate the continent by way of physical investments. If we're going to integrate, take take shipping movement of goods for example, we got to think in the next decade of building railroads once again in this country.
Absolutely. And not only
That
east and west, but
we
north and
have
south
to
too.
think, beyond connecting, the different administrative regions in Guyana. We have to think of building railroads to connect South American countries, passing through
Yes.
Brazil and other
Yeah.
countries, so that goods could move through that railroad and to ship to access other international market.
Yeah.
And so that's how, you tie that into the regional food security agenda. It's not just food security. Tonight we're talking about agriculture and food security, but it's health security, it's financial security, it's energy security, and different sessions we're going to talk about each one of these. So for tonight, we're talking about regional food security. And I've heard a lot of people around the time of the conference um, say that this was Barnum, the late Barnum vision that we're implementing now. I mean, while that is partially correct, um, yes, I'm not taking away the fact that LFS Barnum was a visionary. He was a brilliant man. His political ideology is a different thing altogether, and his political ideology couldn't synchronize with his
And
economic
they were divergent.
his economic objectives, and so that is why he could not have achieved it. It was
Yeah.
he his implementation plan failed. He failed to achieve the objective, and so what is important? It is easy to come up with a vision. That's common sense to produce and to grow your own food. How are we going to achieve it? That's the most important thing.
Hmm.
So, while it's not a competition whose idea and who achieve it, it is important. And what we have seen, as you have rightly pointed out, um, the difference with this agenda is that the Barnum vision was one that was focused on Guyana only and to feed Guyana's people. In this case, we are talking about an entire region to feed an entire region,
Region.
right? And you're right. The food import bill that we're talking about, we're importing food from North America and other parts of the world, which is not healthy. And the ironic thing is, we produce fresh food in the Caribbean. Fresh
Hmm.
food. You could literally pick an okra or an eggplant or a pepper from a kitchen garden and go straight into the pot.
Yeah.
Literally, that's how
Literally, yeah.
fresh food we have here. The
Hmm.
food that we import, the canned stuff, it goes through a process. It's you don't know how long it's on the shelf. It cannot be compared to the fresh food that we have
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And so one of the points that I recall that came out of that forum from the leader, echoed by the leaders, is that we as a people, not just Guyana, but the entire region, we as a people, if we're going to achieve this objective, if we're going to achieve this goal, we've got to change our lifestyle. We've got to
Absolutely.
change our habits. We've
Hmm.
got to appreciate what we have and recognize the value in what we have,
Mhm.
right? And that is what food security is. And you made mention about the crisis that the world is experiencing right now, from COVID-19 to supply chain disruptions to war in Ukraine and so many other things
Mhm.
happening. And they all, have contributed to impacting rising food prices. They've all contributed to
Yeah.
inflation, and we here we're suffering from the impact of imported inflation,
Mhm.
and that is because we're not producing a lot of the stuff that we consume,
Right.
right? In fact, 90% of the stuff that we
So we,
consume, including food, we import it. And obviously,
that's
that
right.
means if you import it from other parts of the world, whatever happened in other parts of the world, if a man die and he didn't come to work and the factory in work, that affects you,
That's right.
right?
That's
If a
right. Mhm.
factory shut down all the way in China or in India or Singapore or wherever, it affects you.
Yeah. So.
It affects us here,
Mhm.
right? So, food security means essentially how could we, in a sustainable manner, produce enough food to feed the Caribbean people and
Mhm.
have enough to export as well,
Yeah.
right? So that we don't have to depend on importing other food that is not as fresh and has the
Good.
kind
Good
of
for that.
nutritional value and health
And,
value that we could produce here,
yeah. and and and
right?
and and also giving the region a whole new economic base to build on what they already have with maybe tourism. In our case, we have so many other resources. But I want to highlight a few areas that was explored and discussed during the Agri conference. One of it was hemp. I think there were
Oh,
like two
yeah.
or three companies who were promoting hemp, and they were giving center stage during the conference and in a few panels. So hemp, I believe, doesn't have a benefit only for Guyana. It becomes an export for us, a foreign exchange earner. For the Caribbean and the rest of the world. In fact, that's not even a Caribbean product. It's going to be a North American, European product. And hemp goes beyond just medicinal use. There's so much use of it. The fiber itself can make houses. Can make clothing. So there's tremendous amount of value, I think, in looking at these new agricultural product. Hemp, of course, is one of them. There was a lot of talk about soya, and that there's 3,000 acres that's being that there's a consortium that the government arranged, and
Co-invested.
yeah, correct. And they're doing exploring soya. And again, soya, has, many multiple uses in an economy. And in Guyana case, you're looking at, or in the Caribbean case, you're looking at that's the main raw material for chicken feed, for example. So if that we were to produce it locally, then then our chicken price drops. It creates jobs for the soybean farmers, for the transporters and all those kind of things. So soybean, I think it's another winning product that the Guyana government is looking to to take further. They were talking about the tourism sector that we feed 13 million tourists a year. 13 million, to almost the same population as the Caribbean, we feed, right? But we don't feed them our stuff. We feed them everybody else. So we import it and we feed them, right? So think about the tons and millions of tons of fruits and vegetables that can go into the tourism sector in the Caribbean. Right in Guyana, lots of fruits and vegetables are just thrown away, are dumped, or buried, so that because there is no market or access and these kind of things. So I think there is lots of opportunities there too. They were talking about fish. And bear in mind that a lot of this stuff that we were talking about and exploring at the Agri Investment Forum, President Irfan has already been talking about it and has been doing things about it. The fishing industry. Think about how much he's incentives and infrastructure he's put into fish and the shrimp industry, right? And of course, the meat export industry, the sheep and all that stuff. I don't know. We have an ongoing agreement with Barbados to bring sheep and to do all these stuff. So there's, and of course we can't discount the traditional sectors like the rice and the sugar and all of our fruits and vegetables that we produce. I think those will continue to grow and expand. But I think it's what I'm sensing is not that Guyana or the Caribbean lack the ability to produce. I think what we lack the ability to is to distribute it among us and to make that into a economic power source. Food is what everybody uses more than oil and gas. We use food more than we use gas. In fact, we use gas to go find food. We use gas to carry food around the place. So there's no doubt that the region, while
Use gas to cook the food too, Salim.
exactly. Yeah. So regionally, while we're talking about the traditional resources of tourism and now oil, agriculture will become what will make us a more competitive destination for our own people and for anyone else who's coming even as a tourist. So I know we're probably at program time now. We want to close, but I want to mention something else. So you talked a lot about integration while this
Yeah.
conference was
Before
talking
before we
Caribbean.
close,
Caribbean. I
yeah.
just want to
Before we close,
yeah.
yeah. Before we close,
Hmm.
I want to integrate some numbers in the discussion. You talk about the vice president said that the region need to invest about $15 billion to
Mhm.
achieve that goal of reducing the import bill by 25% by 2025.
Which is like a couple of months from now.
Correct. So, I mean, when you look at our own provision for the agriculture sector, when you look at the budget allocation from 2020, 2021, and 2022, we have provided cumulatively for these 3 years, these three fiscal years, $73 billion, 73 billion G dollars. That's about 13% of the 2022 budget, which was the largest budget in history and represents about 4% of GDP. So we're
Are,
getting there.
are you
There's
saying that
there's
13% of our budget is allocated to agriculture?
no. I'm saying that the
Hmm.
collective amount from 2020, 2021, and 2022, when you add the three figures together, it amounts to about
Right.
73 billion. That amount represents 13% of this budget alone, this year's budget alone, right?
Correct.
So that means it is less than 13% for
For each year.
each
Correct.
year's
Correct.
budget. But what it also represents is about 4% of GDP. So we also would need to ramp up our investment in agriculture. But this
Absolutely. Yes.
investment is just on the public sector side.
Hmm.
We didn't add in investment on the private sector side. So government has its role to play, which is to invest in the infrastructure, the farm to market access roads, making the agricultural lands available, co-invest with consortiums like they have done with the in the case of the soybean and the corn, with that group that you made reference to.
Hmm.
You know, there's co-invest with where possible in agro processing facilities, providing the fiscal incentives and so forth. And if we were to carry out a survey to see what that private investment would look like and add all of that, it's going to be
Yeah.
way more than $73 billion.
Mhm.
So this is important in terms of
Yeah.
measuring what our government is doing to achieve that
And,
goal, and how effective would those policies be.
mhm.
At this point in time, we could say that there is a clear, concerted effort and backed by tangible action to achieve that 25 percent reduction. And we need to continue as a country, and we must commend the political leadership to continue to lead uh, the regional mandate in
Yeah.
breaking down the barriers and collectively investing in the solutions to all the challenges and all the problems towards achieving that goal.
Yeah. And I,
While at the
mhm.
same time, we as a people, we have to recognize that we need to make some lifestyle changes. We need to change our behavior and so forth. And to the farmers, there's endless opportunities now going to open up for farmers and for new farmers, but we need to think not like farmers, but like entrepreneurs. Farmers need to become entrepreneurs. Farmers need to take advantage of the programs and scholarships and training and so forth that are
Mhm.
available to retool, to learn new
Yeah.
skills, to develop their um,
Mhm.
business skills, entrepreneurial skills. That's how they're going to succeed. Because if everybody remain farmers in that farmer mentality, they're not going to succeed,
Yeah. And we
right?
could,
So those are
yeah.
my closing thoughts,
And
yeah,
those are very useful.
on the
Yeah.
topic tonight.
And I'm glad you spoke about the numbers, because if I can recall well, the vice president in his presentation gave a checklist for all the countries. For us to do this, it can't be a willy-nilly, haphazard. Anyway, are we going to reduce it? He did give, and one of the things that he said, apart from having a dedicated department for this, not necessarily in the Ministry of Agriculture, but in the office of the Prime Minister, that this needs to be orchestrated from the top. And you can see it's happening in Guyana. Agriculture is being managed from the top in Guyana. And he did mention one critical number was, I think it was 15%, that 15% of our budget has to go towards agriculture and agriculture development and infrastructure for agriculture and so on. So I think you're probably going to be seeing some of those numbers reflecting as we move forward. What I was going to say about integrate is that, and you said, we have to have some behavior change, some thinking changes, if you want to reach these milestones. And you talked about integrating South into Brazil and Venezuela and so on. I think that requires, again, a significant paradigm shift in our political and economic outlook. Do we want to be stuck with 15 million people who are can only grow so much, or do we look south and we're exposed to 500 million people, right? So these are some political, economic, big picture, big frame that will have to be looked at by the administration. And I have no doubt that, given what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing from the leadership, that these things are going to be happening. With that, I want to say thank you, JB, for spending these few minutes with me this evening on Tuesday. We want to thank all those who are who joined online, from wherever you are, and thanks for all the comments and the likes and the loves for this show. Continue to tune in to JB&SALIM, where we tackle issues that makes Guyana a better place, at all level, for everyone, throughout the country. With that, I want to say good night. JB, anything else from your end?
No, thank you. It's good to have you back as well. You've been on a 2 weeks vacation and have me alone doing the show.
Yeah.
But good night to our viewers, and thank you for tuning in. And until next week, um, again, good night.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you again, and good night, everyone.